Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Friday, August 1st, 2025. Wall Street falls after a weak July jobs report combined with a downward revision to the jobs numbers for May and June, and concerns about President Donald Trump's tariff schedule finalized overnight, with rates ranging from 10% to 50% for dozens of countries. The Dow falls 542 points. President Trump says he wants to fire the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, citing the jobs numbers revisions, calling her a Biden political appointee, and saying she will be replaced with someone much more competent and qualified. The president again calls on the Senate to cancel August recess and stay in session to confirm a large backlog of his nominations. Senate Republicans have asked the Democrats to bundle some of them and approve them with a voice vote, but the Democrats have refused. Texas House Committee on Congressional Redistricting holds its first hearing since the Republicans put forth a proposed new district map designed, by their own admission, to give them an advantage in 5 more U.S. House seats. And former President Joe Biden warns that the country is facing dark days under President Trump. Associated Press reports that U.S. hiring is slowing sharply as President Donald Trump's erratic and radical trade policies paralyze businesses and raise doubts about the outlook for the world's largest economy. The Labor Department reported Friday the U.S. employers added just 73,000 jobs last month, well short of the 115,000 forecasters had expected. Worse, revisions shaved a stunning 258,000 jobs off May and June payrolls, and the unemployment rate ticked up to 4.2% as Americans dropped out of the labor force and the ranks of the unemployed rose by 221,000. President Donald Trump on Thursday signed an executive order that set new tariffs on a wide swath of U.S. trading partners to go into effect on August 7th, the next step in his trade agenda that will test the global economy and sturdiness of American alliances built up over decades. That was from Associated Press. Labor Secretary Lori Chavez DeRemer was on Bloomberg TV today.
Well, certainly we know they could have been better. But, we look at the positive because we still have a net positive, almost 500,000 new jobs since the president took office. Where did we see some of these, gains? We saw them in healthcare. We're seeing them in construction. We are seeing the revisions, I know, is something to talk about. And they were unexpected, those revisions. But most of those, 62% of those, were in education and seasonal workforce. So, we sometimes see the numbers catch up to what's on the ground. But I can tell you why we're positive is because the president is delivering on these trade deals, these tariff deals, understanding new countries are moving forward and wanting to be at the table. And why does that matter to the American business owner? As you all know, I've been on my 50-state tour. I just returned from several states. A lot of these business owners had some uncertainty in understanding what was going to happen. But now that the One Big Beautiful Bill is done, I feel like the table has been set, and we're seeing those investments happen. So we've seen positive job growth for sure, and they've been for the American workforce. Native-born workers are taking the lead. All job gains have been native-born workers.
I mean, with all due respect, the positive job growth, the most positive months you saw were still what the Trump administration was calling the Biden economy, right? For the first few months when we saw those big numbers, that was the Biden economy. Now that the Trump policy is taking effect, you're seeing downward revisions of 258,000 over the last couple of months. Only 73,000 jobs added. And it looks like, not just to me, but to participants in this market, that today's weak payroll numbers are a direct result of the conscious policy to limit immigration. And I'm just wondering if that trade-off is delivering the kind of benefits you want to see to U.S.-born workers.
Well, I can tell you this. I've been a business owner for 20 years. When we make decisions, we look at all aspects, and there's certainly snapshots. But what has happened on the ground? The One Big Beautiful Bill by Congress, the president leaning in and keeping the promises made by negotiating fair trade deals for the American workforce. And now what we need is the Federal Reserve to jump in and lower those interest rates. I talked to businesses just yesterday who said, we've invested in our American workers. We're paying attention to our facilities. We're wanting to invest and borrow more money, but they're concerned with borrowing that more money. So that's another leg of the stool that can be done. We should all be rowing in the same direction.
Labor Secretary Lori Chavez DeRemer today on Bloomberg Television. On tariffs, a summary from CNN on what the president has negotiated or decided. The 10% universal tariff stays, but about 40 countries with which the U.S. runs a trade deficit will now face a 15% rate. Some will be hit with even steeper rates, such as Brazil's 50% total rate, after an additional 40% was imposed on Wednesday. These new tariffs, some of which were set through trade deals, will take effect August 7th. That was from CNN. President Donald Trump posting today on Truth Social, "I was just informed that our country's jobs numbers, in quotes, are being produced by a Biden appointee, Dr. Erica McIntyre, the Commissioner of Labor Statistics, who faked the jobs numbers before the election to try and boost Kamala's chances of victory." And further on in the post, "I have directed my team to fire this Biden political appointee immediately. She will be replaced with someone much more competent and qualified." The president was asked about this as he left the White House today.
Why did you fire the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics? Because I think her numbers were wrong. Just like I thought her numbers were wrong before the election. Days before the election, she came out with these beautiful numbers for Kamala. I guess Biden/Kamala. And she came out with these beautiful numbers trying to get somebody else elected. Then right after the election, I think on the 15th, November 15th, she had an $800,000 or $900,000 massive reduction. Said she made a mistake. That woman's numbers are...
President Donald Trump speaking to reporters outside the White House. Former BLS Commissioner William Beach, appointed by President Trump and serving from 2019 through 23, put out a statement. "The totally groundless firing of Dr. Erica McIntyre, my successor as Commissioner of Labor Statistics at BLS, sets a dangerous precedent and undermines the statistical mission of the Bureau." The U.S. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, spoke on the Senate floor today about the commissioner, also the jobs report, and tariffs.
What is a very bad leader? What does a bad leader do when they get bad news? Shoot the messenger. That's just what happened with the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Today, we got some of the worst labor numbers that we've gotten in a long time. The economy added only a paltry 73,000 jobs last month, but that wasn't the worst of it. We learned the economy actually added less than 20,000 jobs each in May and June, following 2 months of Donald Trump's Liberation Day. That's 250,000 fewer jobs more than we thought. So, of course, that's very bad news for the economy. But what does Donald Trump do? Instead of trying to fix the economy, he shoots the messenger. The woman he fired, the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, passed this Senate 88-8. Vice President Vance voted for her. And now, fire her. Well, Donald Trump, firing her isn't going to relieve the chaos that you've created with your ramshackle tariff regime. Shooting the messenger isn't going to make the jobs that we're losing in healthcare and clean energy because of your so-called big, beautiful bill come back. None of this will change. The American people will still suffer in exactly the same way that they did an hour ago before you fired the head of the BLS. You know, Donald Trump sometimes admires dictators. He admires them. Well, he sometimes acts just like them. It's classic Donald Trump. When he gets the news he doesn't like, he shoots the messenger. Now, there's a word for this when the Soviet Union does it, when the dictators of the Russians did it. They called it pripisky. It meant fire the messenger, don't change your policies. As long as Donald Trump keeps firing messengers who bring him truth, he hates truth when he doesn't agree with it. As long as he does that, this economy will not improve. Inflation and costs to the American people will not go away. New jobs will not return to this country. He ought to start governing like a leader, not like someone who imitates authoritarian leaders.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, today on the Senate floor. Story from Newsweek. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has said he is disappointed by President Donald Trump's move to increase certain tariffs from 25% to 35%. Carney, writing on X, President Trump has announced that the U.S. will impose its tariffs to 35% on those Canadian exports that are not covered under the United States-Mexico Agreement, or CUSMA. While the Canadian government is disappointed in this action, we remain committed to CUSMA, which is the world's second largest free trade agreement by trading volume. Trump announced the increase on Thursday, saying Canada has failed to cooperate in curbing the ongoing flood of fentanyl and other illicit drugs, and it has retaliated against the U.S. for the president's actions to address this unusual and extraordinary threat to the United States. Reporting from Newsweek. And Wall Street reacting to this first trading day after the tariff rates have been set and the jobs report came out. The Dow down 542, NASDAQ down 472, S&P down 101. Yahoo Finance reports that Federal Reserve Governor Adriana Kugler said Friday she will resign from the Federal Reserve Board of Governors effective August 8th, meaning President Trump could have a replacement in her seat earlier than expected. The term of Kugler, who was appointed by President Biden, was due to expire on January 31st. That was from Yahoo Finance. Another post from President Donald Trump today, most of it in all caps, about the Federal Reserve Chair, Jerome Powell. He writes, Jerome Too Late Powell, a stubborn moron, must substantially lower interest rates now. If he continues to refuse, the board should assume control and do what everyone knows has to be done. In another post, he writes, strong dissents on Fed board. It will only get stronger too late. Wall Street Journal writing that millions of student loan borrowers are bracing for significantly higher monthly payments after Trump administration moved to wind down one of the federal government's most affordable repayment options. Interest was set to start accruing again Friday for the nearly 8 million people enrolled in the Saving on a Valuable Education Plan, or SAVE. The Education Department said it is making the change to comply with a federal court injunction that blocked the plan, which was introduced under the Biden administration. That was from the Wall Street Journal. Education Secretary Linda McMahon posted a video about a week ago announcing this change.
Attention student loan borrowers enrolled in the SAVE plan. On August 1st, the Department of Education will resume charging interest on your loans. This change is required by law. When you take out a loan, you must pay it back. The Biden administration attempted loan forgiveness to win points with their voters, but federal courts have repeatedly ruled these actions are unlawful. The truth is, there is no such thing as loan forgiveness. It's just shifting debts from one party to another. The Trump administration will not allow the American taxpayer to take on debts that are not their own. The department stands ready to help you identify a new and legal repayment plan. If you are a borrower enrolled in the illegal SAVE plan, please visit studentaid.gov to learn about affordable repayment options.
Education Secretary Linda McMahon posting that video. The group Student Borrower Protection Center estimates the typical student loan borrower affected by this change will pay $300 per month in interest charges. Story from Axios. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting said on Friday it will begin winding down operations following Congress's vote to cut nearly $1.1 billion in federal funding. The decision is expected to severely impact local member stations of PBS and NPR that depend on federal support to operate. CPB said it told its employees that the majority of positions will be eliminated September 30th, with a small transition team staying on through January 2026. The president and CEO, Patricia Harrison, putting out a statement, despite the extraordinary effort of millions of Americans who called, wrote, and petitioned Congress to preserve federal funding for CPB, we now face the difficult reality of closing our operations. That was from Axios. And the Senate Appropriations Committee did not include funding for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting in its proposed fiscal year 2026 spending bills marked up this week. Another post from President Donald Trump on Truth Social, this from Thursday night. The Senate must stay in session, taking no recess until the entire executive calendar is clear. We have to save our country from the lunatic left, Republicans, for the health and safety of the USA. Do your job and confirm all nominees. They should not be forced to wait. Thank you for your attention to this matter. That was the post from President Trump. Senator Mike Lee, Republican of Utah, quote tweeted, adding, "I'm in, let's do this." And Senator Cynthia Lummis, Republican from Wyoming, quote tweeted, writing, "I'll bring the Celsius." The Senate has been voting on a handful of nominations each day, but there are at least 130 nominees waiting for a vote. Senator John Barrasso, Republican of Wyoming, the majority whip, spoke about this today on the Senate floor.
I rise today to shine a spotlight on what Democrats are doing in terms of unprecedented obstruction of the Senate nominating process. The nomination process has been ground to a halt as a result of the Democrats. Today, like every other day this Congress, Senate Republicans will burn hours of floor time on votes that for every other president of the United States would have taken only seconds. Until now. President Trump is the only president in modern history not to have a single nominee confirmed by voice vote or unanimous consent. Not a single one. Even the most routine nominations are being filibustered. Positions that used to just fly through the Senate by voice vote or unanimous consent are now being treated and taken as political hostages. This isn't normal. This is petty partisan politics at its worst, and it is petty.
Senator John Barrasso, Republican from Wyoming, the majority whip on the Senate floor. He went on to describe how nominations have been handled by previous Senates, handling nominations from previous presidential administrations. When he finished, Senator Dick Durbin, Democrat from Illinois, the minority whip, responded.
Mr. President, the senator from Wyoming was just on the floor and spoke about the schedule of business here in the United States Senate, particularly the question of nominations. Senator Barrasso is my friend. We disagree on a lot of political things, but we respect one another, and I certainly respect him. There's an important chapter that he just left out of recounting the history of the nominations process in the Senate. I call it the J.D. Vance chapter. Listen to this. When Donald Trump was in his first term, he nominated over 90 U.S. attorneys. Every one of them passed with a voice vote, with the possible exception of one in Massachusetts. Every one of these passed with a voice vote. In other words, we didn't require any roll calls. We filled these vacancies for U.S. attorneys. Then came Joe Biden. And under the Biden presidency, a decision was made by one senator, J.D. Vance of the state of Ohio. He came along and said, I no longer will allow you, my right as a senator, to stop it. I will no longer allow you to have a nominee for U.S. attorney go through without a roll call. It sounds like a very minor request, but with potentially over 90 of these roll calls, we found ourselves backed up in a situation where we couldn't approve any U.S. attorneys. We didn't have the time on the calendar to do it because of the J.D. Vance requirement. I came to this floor, this very spot, 8 times, pleading with then Senator J.D. Vance, please don't do this. We have comity and understanding on U.S. attorneys. We did under Trump in his first term, and we certainly did in the early stages of Biden, but now you're requiring roll call votes on each of the U.S. attorneys, and it's going to create an obstacle to progress on the floor of the Senate. 8 times I came to the floor asking unanimous consent for Senator Vance to withdraw this demand. He refused each time. Then he went off to run for vice president. And while he was gone running for vice president, I came to the floor again and asked the Republicans remaining in the Senate chamber to allow me a unanimous consent that nominees for U.S. attorney would not go through this roll call process. Unfortunately, a number of now sitting U.S. senators on the Republican side came to the floor and objected. They wanted to keep the Vance rule in place. I warned them that the obstacles they were creating under President Biden, unprecedented, that had not been seen under President Trump in his first term, would come back to haunt all of us, and now they have. This requires us to sit down at some point and have an understanding moving forward, not just on nominees and whether there are roll calls on the floor, but fundamental and basic questions as to whether or not a minority position, for example, on an important agency or council is going to be respected. What the Trump administration has done, for example, in many places, in commissions and agencies, is to eliminate the Democrats, to fire them from their jobs and leave vacancies unfilled. And then the Republicans come to us and say, well, we have Republican nominees for the Republican spots. And we say, what about the Democratic nominees? Say, we're not going to allow you to call any of those. There's got to be some understanding and comedy, and you think that grown-ups should be able to resolve this issue. But the representation of what our problem is this morning did not include those two elements and many others. I hope we can resolve this in a favorable way for the benefit of the American people, but there is a history behind it.
Senator Dick Durbin, Democrat from Illinois, the minority whip on the Senate floor. This is Washington Today. The Texas House of Representatives Select Committee on Congressional Redistricting held its first hearing today since the release of a new proposed map that the Republican majority intends to help their party gain at least 5 additional seats in the U.S. House. The hearing was held in the state capitol building in Austin, Texas. State Representative Todd Hunter, a Republican, the sponsor, explained what's in this map.
Now, we are allowed to draw congressional districts, and I want the members to know this, and everybody listening, whether you agree or disagree. And by the way, this has been involved with both major parties. You can draw districts based on political performance, political partisanship. That's recognized by the United States Supreme Court. These districts were drawn primarily using political performance. That criteria from the U.S. Supreme Court. That's why I'm explaining this to be open to everybody. Also, the law in the Fifth Circuit on coalition districts. Now, coalition districts you will hear about, members. And they've been given some definitions, but it's generally when 2 different minority or language groups are combined. Under the Fifth Circuit, and this is a recent decision, they changed the law. And by the way, Representative Manuel, that was done since 2021. Coalition districts were held by the court that Section 2 no longer requires the drawing of coalition districts. Now, one of the things we've heard over and over is the word compactness. This is not the word packing. This is not the word cracking. Compactness is the configuration. But we heard that in these hearings. And this plan took that information and tried to make it better compact and contiguous. Now, and I want to be open to everybody, given that political performance is an acceptable reason for drawing districts, and clarification from the Fifth Circuit on coalition districts, we have redrawn the congressional map with those points. And I want to be real clear. There is completely transparent, and it's lawful. Another important law that we have to follow, and you've heard in the hearings, members, is the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And although race cannot be a predominant factor in drawing maps, Section 2 of that act prohibits enactment of any plan that restricts minority citizens from having an opportunity to elect their preferred candidate of choice if certain circumstances exist. Now, this plan includes political considerations, the public testimony from the hearings, population growth, which has occurred, and recent changes in voter trends. The proposed plan redraws, and I want everybody to know this, 37 of the 38 congressional districts to some degree. The primary changes, though, are focused on 5 districts for partisan purposes. It is important to note that 4 of the 5 new districts are majority, minority, Hispanic CVAP districts, citizens voting age population. How many? 4 of the 5 new districts. Each of these newly drawn districts now trend Republican in political performance. Doesn't guarantee electoral success. Does not guarantee. That's up to the candidates. But it does allow Republican candidates the opportunity to compete in these districts.
Todd Hunter, Texas State Representative, a Republican, at today's meeting of the Texas House of Representatives Select Committee on Congressional Redistricting as he presented the proposed new map. Many of the current members of Congress who are Democrats in Texas were witnesses at today's hearing. Here's Jasmine Crockett.
So first of all, it is a sham that we sit here and y'all pretend as if you care about what the people have to say, but we are going to make y'all listen as long as you will. This map does nothing but divide, distract, and depress. There is this idea that was put out there during his opening remarks that this does so much for black folk. Well, let me tell you, as a black person, it does not. Let me tell you that in this map, to be clear, y'all added 2 additional Anglo majority seats. Now, when we went through the 21 maps, you added 2 Anglo majority seats, and now you're adding 2 more Anglo majority seats, and then you've decided that you are going to pack and crack, and that is the language that I am going to use because that is the legal language. And I also just want to remind y'all really quickly that it does not look good when you take every economic engine out of my district and then tell me that I am supposed to sit here and be so happy because you added black folk from a whole other community. When you want to talk about monoliths and whether or not they exist, this idea that you just take people and move them around. I have 200,000 people who were never in my district, and my district is 766,000. Playing move minorities around so that you can somehow claim that this is nothing but partisanship. The only way that you get here is by making sure that you trample upon the rights and the liberties and the voices of minorities. So let me give you a few facts about the state of Texas. The state of Texas only has 39% Anglos, yet somehow under this map, we are going to have somewhere near 60-something, almost 70% of these seats are gonna be chosen by Anglos. If we were looking for fairness and to follow the Voting Rights Act, you'd have 15 Latino opportunity seats, 15 Anglo seats. You then have 4 African-American opportunity seats. Then you'd have 2 Asian opportunity seats, and the other 2 seats would belong to coalitions because we are a majority-minority state where over 60% of this population is people of color. So if you want to do what's fair and right under the Voting Rights Act, as well as if you say that this Fifth Circuit Court case matters and somehow changes everything, my question to you is, when are y'all gonna do y'all's maps? Because you did your maps in 2021 and then the case came out and I haven't seen y'all talk about the fact that you're gonna redistrict the House and the Senate.
Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, Democrat from Texas, as a witness before the Texas House of Representatives Select Committee on Congressional Redistricting at today's hearing as the proposed map from the Republicans was presented by the sponsor, State Representative Todd Hunter. A Yahoo News article reads, Republicans currently hold 25 of Texas's 38 congressional districts. The new map puts them in position to hold 30 House seats after next year, which would give them 80% of the state's representation in Congress in a state where President Trump secured 56% of the vote in last year's presidential race, according to the official tally from the Texas Secretary of State. Washington Today continues in a moment.
America marks 250 years, and C-SPAN is there to commemorate every moment, from the signing of the Declaration of Independence to the voices shaping our nation's future. We bring you unprecedented all-platform coverage, exploring the stories, sights, and spirit that make up America. Join us for remarkable coast-to-coast coverage celebrating our nation's journey like no other network can. America 250. Over a year of historic moments. Only on the C-SPAN networks.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. A few more headlines. President Trump posting on Truth Social, based on the highly provocative statements of the former president of Russia, Dmitry Medvedev, who is now the deputy chairman of the Security Council of the Russian Federation. I have ordered 2 nuclear submarines to be positioned in the appropriate regions just in case these foolish and inflammatory statements are more than just that. Words are very important and can often lead to unintended consequences. I hope this will not be one of those instances. Thank you for your attention to this matter. That post from President Trump. The president's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, writing on X, at President Trump's direction, Ambassador Huckabee and I met yesterday with Israeli officials to discuss the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Today, we spent over 5 hours inside Gaza, level setting the facts on the ground, assessing conditions, and meeting with Gaza Humanitarian Foundation and other agencies. The purpose of the visit was to give President Trump a clear understanding of the humanitarian situation and help craft a plan to deliver food and medical aid to the people of Gaza. That post from Steve Witkoff. Chicago Sun-Times writes, in his second post-office visit to Chicago, former President Joe Biden stopped to accept an award from the National Bar Association, blasting President Donald Trump without ever saying his name to the crowd at the Hyatt Regency in the Loop Thursday evening. The annual gala was hosted by the National Bar Association, the country's oldest and largest national association of predominantly African-American lawyers, judges, law professors, and law students. The group awarded him its highest honor, the C. Francis Stratford Award, named for the group's founder. In a 22-minute speech, Biden focused on praising black pioneers in the legal field, such as Stratford, before lambasting his successor. Without uttering his name once, Biden said Trump was dismantling the Constitution and harped on Trump's actions in office. That was from the Chicago Sun-Times. Here's part of the speech.
In our lives, the life of our nation, there are moments so stark that they divide all that came before from everything that followed. Moments that force us to confront hard truths about ourselves, our institutions, and democracy itself. We are, in my view, at such a moment in American history. Amen. Reflected in every cruel executive outreach, every rollback of basic freedoms, every erosion of long-standing established precedent. We've seen the law firms bowing to pressure, bending to bullies, instead of staying rooted in justice and the law, including some of the largest newspapers in America. We see the apparent glee some of our politicians express. That's while watching immigrants who are in this country legally, torn from the arms of their family, dragged away in handcuffs from the only home they've ever known. My friends, we need to face the hard truth of this administration. It has been to ease all the gains we've made in my administration, to erase history rather than make it, to erase fairness, equality, to erase justice itself. And that's not hyperbole, that's a fact. Look, folks, we can't sugarcoat this. These are dark days, but you're all here for the same reason. I left that prestigious law firm in the public defender's office to go to the defender's office years ago. It's because our future is literally on the line. We must be unapologetic of fighting for the future. To paraphrase Frederick Douglass, there is no progress without struggle.
And I would add, there is no progress without courage. None.
Former President Joe Biden speaking to the National Bar Association annual gala in Chicago Thursday night. The association is the oldest and largest network of predominantly black legal professionals in the country. WGN-TV reports there have been several notable speakers during its 100th annual convention this week. Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul, and Chicago Bears President and CEO Kevin Warren were all on the agenda. The governors of the two states surrounding Washington, D.C., Republican Glenn Youngkin of Virginia and Democrat Wes Moore of Maryland, both spoke in the past week about how best to promote economic opportunity and prosperity at different events. Governor Youngkin was in Washington on Monday for the launch of a new website by the group Unleash Prosperity. It's votewithyourfeet.net, which the group says shows states with high income taxes are losing people and money to states with no income tax. Here's Governor Youngkin.
I have been talking about this for 5 years. And for 5 years, I have been basically an apostle talking about the fact that if you have fewer customers today in your state, fewer people than you had yesterday, your state is heading in the wrong direction. And when those people take their money with them, and that money represents a disproportionate amount of your state's economic activity, you got a major challenge. And I have to say, Steve and I just hit it off literally like two kids in a candy shop, because we started talking about this right when I was running. And I finally found somebody else on the planet that would listen to me. My wife was even not listening to me at that point. She's like, honey, I know this, out-migration, I get it. But at the end of the day, this is at the economic and, by the way, the financial heart of a state. Because one of the things that is going to be on the next chart is states that are running deficits and states that are running surpluses. Because if you are shrinking, you are running a deficit. And if you are growing, you are running a surplus. And it's just that simple. And that's the difference between winning states and losing states. And that's why you can look at the states that are increasing even their share of new jobs and people, and they're the ones that get to invest time and time and time again, and the ones that are consistently offering tax relief time and time again. And how about this for a basic economic cycle? We're going to reduce your taxes. And then we're going to see more people come to my state. And those more people are going to bring with them their income, and they're going to pay taxes. And then we have a surplus. And with that surplus, we get to invest in education and law enforcement and behavioral health, and we get to reduce taxes again. And guess what? More people come. And this virtuous cycle actually works. And we know it works is because that is what we've unleashed in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Governor Glenn Youngkin, Republican of Virginia, on Monday in Washington at a program hosted by the group Unleash Prosperity. Governor Wes Moore, Democrat from Maryland, also spoke about promoting economic growth at the National Governors Association meeting in Colorado Springs, Colorado, last Saturday, July 26th. The question came from the outgoing NGA chair, Governor Jared Polis, Democrat of Colorado.
What type of things do you think governors can and should do to lean into encouraging entrepreneurism and innovation and excellence and all these things that you're talking about in ways that, for you, the military work, that's not going to happen for everybody. Not everybody's going to join the military. But what are some of the things that states should be looking at to kind of be able to provide a meaningful experience that helps young people live their dreams?
I remember when I was running for governor, I had people who I served with in Afghanistan who came and campaigned on my behalf. And, many of them were not Marylanders. Many of them were not Democrats. But they were literally just coming and door knocking on my behalf and just telling people, I just want to tell you about the guy that I served with. And it was one of these things that really helped us to understand and see firsthand just the power of service. That the people who you serve with, those are going to be your brothers and sisters for life. And, one of the first things that we did when we came on board, we actually, in fact, the first bill that I introduced when I became the governor The first bill that that I testified on behalf of and was very proud to sign was something called the SERV Act of 2023, which made Maryland now the first state in the country that now offers a service year option for all of our high school graduates. So every high school graduate has a chance to do a year of service to the state of Maryland, and they can choose however they want to do it. If they want to work in the environment, if they want to work serving veterans, if they want to work serving young people, if they want to serve older adults, if they want to work with animals, it is completely their choice. The only thing we tell them is, tell us what makes your heart beat a little bit faster, and let's give you a pathway to go do it. And the thing that we have now found, we've now had thousands of these young people go through this platform already in just the 2.5 years that our administration has been on board. But it has been a remarkable workforce development tool, where just like you're watching not just private sector, nonprofit sector, who are all taking on these young people, and so they're really using it as a workforce development tool for them. That it has been fantastic in terms of showing how you can get people into a workforce, how big believer in an earned financial cushion. If you're willing to do the work, then you should be compensated for the work that you're doing. But the third thing was that in this time of this political divisiveness and political vitriol, that service will save us. Service is the antidote. Because we are watching how these young people who come from completely different parts of the state, completely different backgrounds, who are working on a project together in a way that they're now getting to know each other that they never would have got to know each other. The same reason where I would have never had a reason to go to Columbus, Georgia, or Fayetteville, or Fort Leonard Wood, or Fort Lewis. But the military gave me not just an appreciation for service, but it introduced me to a whole new group of new family members that I now have and I will lean on for the rest of my life, and they know they can lean on me for the rest of their life. So I love the idea that the earlier we can expose young people to be part of something bigger than themselves, the earlier we can give young people the opportunity to find that thing that breaks your heart. Because the thing that breaks your heart is probably breaking the world's heart too. Go fix it and go work together to go address it. That it's been a remarkable tool for our state, and I'm just a big believer that service is sticky, and that especially in this time, that service will save us.
Governor Wes Moore, a Democrat from Maryland, on a panel titled Reigniting the American Dream at the National Governors Association meeting in Colorado Springs, Colorado on July 26th. The panel was moderated by the incoming NGA chair, Governor Kevin Stitt, Republican from Oklahoma. The National Transportation Safety Board held its third and final day of hearings today in Washington on the investigation to the January 29th Midair collision between a commercial airliner and a Army helicopter near Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport that killed all 67 people on board both the plane and the helicopter. Associated Press writing the pilots of a U.S. Army helicopter that collided with a passenger jet over Washington in January would have had difficulty spotting the plane while wearing night vision goggles, experts told the National Transportation Safety Board on Friday. 2 previous days of testimony underscored a number of factors that likely contributed to the collision, sparking board chairwoman Jennifer Hamady to urge the Federal Aviation Administration to do better as she pointed to warnings the agency ignored years earlier. Some of the major issues that have emerged so far include the Black Hawk helicopter flying above prescribed levels near the airport, as well as the warnings to FAA officials for years about the hazards related to the heavy chopper traffic there. Also coming up, short staffing among federal aviation workers, reporting from Associated Press. Here's part of today's hearing. The NTSB Chair Jennifer Hamady questioning Frank McIntosh, FAA Air Traffic Organization acting COO, about the Army's reluctance to use an anti-collision technology known as Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast, or ADSB.
In June 26, 2023, after our last set of recommendations on whether FAA was going to implement ADS-B in. The last response that we have ever received from FAA on this is June 26, 2023, and the acting administrator at that time stated, "We have determined that our current ADS-B requirements adequately address the needs of aviation safety and will not pursue any additional ADS-B requirements at this time." So, given that, I'm going to ask, actually also I will, okay, actually I'll get to that in a minute. So I'm going to ask, does FAA right now support requiring that any newly manufactured aircraft registered in the U.S. be equipped with ADS-B in?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Do you also support or oppose requiring that any aircraft required to be equipped with ADS-B out today when operating in an airspace described in Section 91.225D of Title 49 CFR, Code of Federal Regulations, also be required to install and operate ADS-B in?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you.
NTSB Chair Jennifer Homendy questioning Frank McIntosh, FAA Air Traffic Organization acting COO, at today's hearing in Washington on the investigation into the deadly plane-helicopter midair collision in January near Reagan Airport. Today is the third of 3 days. C-SPAN has covered it all, and you can find the video at cspan.org. Again, from the Associated Press article on the hearings, it's too early for the board to identify what exactly caused the crash. A final report from the board won't come until next year. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word and get the stories making headlines in Washington emailed to you every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night and weekend.